In the scorching summer of 1887, when the Arizona Territory was still wild and untamed, a single moment behind a hidden waterfall would forever alter the destiny of two souls from different worlds. This is not just another tale of the Old West. This is the story of how a misplaced dress, a respectful cowboy, and an Apache woman's whispered plea spark a love that defied every law, tradition, and bullet that stood in their way. What happens when honor meets desire? When two cultures collide, not in violence, but in the most unexpected moment of vulnerability. When a simple act of turning away becomes the first step toward a love story that will echo through the canyons of time. Some say the desert keeps its secrets buried in sand and stone, but this secret refused to stay hidden, and it would cost everything and give everything to those brave enough to fight for it. The dust cloud behind Jake Morrison's horse stretched for miles across the Arizona desert, a brown ribbon against the blazing orange sky. His throat felt like sandpaper, and his water skin had been empty since dawn. The sun was a merciless enemy, beating down on his weathered hat and making his shirt stick to his back like a second skin. Jake had been riding for 3 days straight, chasing rumors of wild horses in the canyons north of Tucson. At 28, he was already known as one of the best horse breakers in the territory, but these horses were special. The Apache called them spirit horses, and Jake had heard they were faster than lightning and more beautiful than dreams. His horse, a sturdy mare named Belle, suddenly perked up her ears and quickened her pace. Jake knew that look. Water was nearby. Following Belle's instincts had saved his life more times than he could count, and he wasn't about to question her now. They rounded a massive red rock formation, and Jake heard it before he saw it. The sweet sound of falling water. His heart raced with relief. A waterfall meant fresh water, shade, and a chance to rest. Belle whinnied softly and broke into a trot toward the sound. The waterfall was hidden in a narrow canyon, surrounded by towering red cliffs that seemed to touch the sky. Ancient cottonwood trees created a green oasis around a crystal-clear pool. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful in all his years wandering the desert. The water cascaded down from 50 feet above, creating a natural shower that sparkled like diamonds in the afternoon sun. Jake dismounted and let Belle drink her fill while he knelt beside the pool. The water was so clear he could see every pebble on the bottom. He cupped his hands and drank deeply, feeling life flow back into his parched throat. This was paradise in the middle of hell. As he splashed water on his face and neck, he heard something that made his blood freeze. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, speaking in a language he didn't understand. Apache. His hand instinctively moved to his gun. Jake had nothing against the Apache people personally, but tensions were high throughout the territory. The Apache wars had been raging for years, and trust between whites and natives was scarcer than rain in August. Still, something about the voice made him hesitate. It wasn't the harsh tone of a war cry or the commanding voice of a warrior. It was gentle, almost musical. He crept closer to the waterfall, using the rocks and trees as cover. The voice came from behind a cascade of water. There was a space back there, hidden from view. Jake realized this must be a secret place, known only to the Apache who lived in these canyons. His curiosity got the better of his caution. Moving as quietly as his boots would allow on the rocky ground, Jake positioned himself where he could peer around the edge of the waterfall. What he saw there would burn itself into his memory forever. A young Apache woman stood in the hidden alcove behind the falling water. She was perhaps 22 or 23 years old, with long black hair that fell like silk down her back. Her skin was the color of burnished copper, and even from a distance, Jake could see the graceful way she moved. But what caught his attention most was her predicament. She was searching frantically around the rocky alcove, speaking in urgent whispers. Her traditional Apache dress was nowhere to be seen, and she had wrapped herself in what appeared to be a large piece of deerskin. She was clearly looking for something, and from her distressed tone, it was something important. Jake's mind raced. He should leave immediately. This was not his business, and if he was discovered, it could mean trouble for both of them. But something kept him rooted to the spot. The woman's obvious distress tugged at something deep in his chest. Then she turned toward the waterfall, and for a moment, Jake thought she had seen him. But She was looking past the water, scanning the area beyond. When she spoke again, her voice carried clearly over the sound of falling water. "Cowboy, don't peek. My dress is missing," she murmured in English, her accent thick but understandable. Jake's heart nearly stopped. She knew he was there. Somehow, she had sensed his presence, even though he had been sure he was hidden. His face burned with embarrassment and shame. Here was a woman in distress, and he had been spying on her like some kind of scoundrel. Without thinking, Jake stepped back and called out, "Ma'am, I apologize. I heard voices and wanted to make sure no one was in danger. I'll turn around and give you privacy." True to his word, Jake turned his back to the waterfall and removed his hat. His mother had raised him to be a gentleman, and no amount of frontier living had changed that. A woman's modesty was sacred, no matter what color her skin might be. "You are not going to hurt me?" the woman called back. Suspicion cleared her voice. "No, ma'am," Jake replied firmly. "I give you my word. I'm just a cowboy looking for water and shade. I'll keep my back turned until you tell me it's safe to look." There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of falling water and Belle's contented munching on the grass near the pool. Jake wondered if he should just mount up and ride away, but something told him this woman needed help. "My dress," she said finally. "It was stolen by a coyote. The animal came while I was bathing and took it from the rocks. Now I am trapped here." Jake almost smiled despite the situation. He had seen coyotes steal all kinds of things, boots, food, even a hat once. They were curious creatures and not above a little mischief. "I might be able to help," Jake offered. "I've got a spare shirt in my saddlebags. It's not much, but it would cover you proper until you can get home." Another long silence. "Why would you help me? Your people and my people are not friends." The pain in her voice was unmistakable. Jake turned his head slightly, though he kept his eyes averted. "Because it's the right thing to do. My mama always said a person's character is measured by how they treat folks when no one's watching. Well, someone's watching now, even if it's just God and the canyon walls." He heard movement behind the waterfall. Then, the woman's voice, closer now. "You may turn around, cowboy." But slowly, Jake turned carefully, his hands visible and empty. The woman had emerged from behind the waterfall, still wrapped in the deerskin. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he had first thought. Her eyes were dark and intelligent, framed by thick lashes. High cheekbones gave her face a regal quality, and her full lips were set in a line that suggested both caution and determination. "I am Ayana," she said simply. "It means eternal blossom in my language. Jacques Morison, Mom. Pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Jake walked to Belle and retrieved his spare shirt from the saddlebags. It was clean and mended, though well-worn from years of use. He handed it to Ayana without looking at her directly. "This should help until you can find your dress or get home." Ayana took the shirt and examined it. It was soft cotton, faded blue from many washings. "This is very kind. How do I know you will not follow me? How do I know I can trust you?" Jake met her eyes steadily. "Because I'm telling you true. A man's word is all he really owns out here. I give you mine that you're safe with me." Something in his voice or his manner must have convinced her, because Ayana nodded slowly. "Turn around again, please." Jake obeyed immediately, staring out at the desert beyond the canyon. He heard rustling as she put on his shirt, and he tried not to think about how it would look on her. "You may look now." When Jake turned back, he had to catch his breath. His shirt fell to her mid-thigh, and she had belted it with a strip of leather. Somehow, she had managed to make his old work shirt look elegant. Her long hair cascaded over one shoulder, and she stood with the natural grace of someone born to the desert. "Thank you," she said formally. "I am in your debt." "No debt," Jake replied quickly. "Just one person helping another." Ayana studied him for a long moment. "You are not like other white men I have known. I hope that's a good thing." For the first time, she almost smiled. "Perhaps. You did not look when you could have. You offered help when you could have taken advantage. These are not common things." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks again. Any decent man would have done the same. "No," Ayana said firmly. "They would not. I have learned much about white men in my 23 years. Most would have looked. Most would have demanded payment for their help. Most would have seen only an Apache woman alone and thought of what they could take." The sadness in her voice cut Jake to the quick. He realized she was speaking from experience, and it made his chest tight with anger. Not at her, but at the men who had taught her to expect such treatment. "Well, you're safe with me," he repeated. "My word on it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the sound of falling water filling the space between them. Jake knew he should leave, but he found himself reluctant to go. There was something about this woman that drew him like a moth to flame. "I should head back to my people," Ayanna said finally. "They will worry if I'm gone too long." "Of course," Jake agreed. "Do you need an escort? These canyons can be dangerous." Ayanna's eyes flashed. "I know these canyons better than you know your own hands, cowboy. I was born in them." Jake held up his hands in surrender. "I meant no offense. Just offering." Her expression softened slightly. "I know. You meant well. But I must go alone. If my people saw me with a white man—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Jake understood. It would mean trouble for both of them. "I understand." Jake picked up his hat and settled it on his head. "I'll head out and give you a good head start. Thank you for the water and for not shooting me on sight." This time Ayanna did smile, and it transformed her face completely. "Thank you for your shirt and your kindness. Perhaps the spirits brought you here for a reason." "Maybe they did," Jake agreed, though he didn't really believe in such things. "You take care of yourself, Miss Ayanna. And you, Jake Morrison." The way she said his name sent a shiver down his spine. There was something musical about her voice, something that made even his common name sound special. Jake mounted Belle and rode out of the canyon, but he couldn't resist one look back. Ayanna stood beside the waterfall, a striking figure in his blue shirt, watching him go. She raised one hand in farewell, and Jake touched the brim of his hat in response. As he rode across the desert, Jake found his thoughts returning again and again to the Apache woman by the waterfall. He told himself it was just because it had been an unusual encounter, but deep down he knew it was more than that. There had been something in her eyes, something in the way she had smiled, that had reached right through all his defenses and grabbed hold of his heart. He tried to shake off the feeling. Romance between a white cowboy and an Apache woman was impossible. Their worlds were too different, the hatred between their peoples too deep. It was a fantasy that could only lead to heartbreak or worse. But as the sun began to set and the desert sky turned the color of fire, Jake found himself planning a route that would take him back past the waterfall. Just to make sure she had made it home safely, he told himself. Just to check that the spring was still there for future reference. He knew he was lying to himself, but sometimes a man needed his lies to get through the desert nights. And as Belle carried him toward the distant mountains, Jake Morrison began to understand that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Behind him, hidden in the canyon shadows, Ayanna watched the dust cloud of his passage until it disappeared into the gathering darkness. She touched the soft cotton of his shirt and wondered if she would ever see the kind cowboy again. Part of her hoped not, for both their sakes. But a larger part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, hoped that fate would bring them together once more. The spirits moved in mysterious ways, her grandmother always said. Perhaps they had plans that neither Jake Morrison nor Ayanna could imagine. The waterfall continued its eternal song, keeping the secrets of the day in its misty embrace, while two hearts carried new and dangerous feelings out into the vast Arizona night. 3 weeks passed before Jake Morrison found himself in the canyon country again. He told himself he was tracking those wild horses, but his route kept taking him closer and closer to the hidden waterfall. Every morning he saddled Belle with the intention of heading in a different direction, and every evening he found himself camped within a day's ride of that magical pool. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about Ayanna. Her face haunted his dreams, and her voice echoed in his mind during the long, hot days. He had met plenty of women in his travels, saloon girls in Tombstone, ranchers' daughters, even a schoolteacher from back east. But none of them had affected him like the Apache woman who had trusted him with her vulnerability. Jake knew it was foolish. He knew it was dangerous. But he found himself riding toward the waterfall anyway, drawn by a force stronger than common sense. The canyon looked exactly the same when he arrived in the late afternoon. The cottonwoods cast their familiar shade, and the waterfall sang its eternal song. Belle drank from a pool while Jake pretended to check his gear. His eyes kept drifting to the space behind the falling water, hoping for a glimpse of copper skin and long black hair. He was so focused on the waterfall that he almost missed the movement in the rocks above. A glint of metal caught his eye, and Jake's blood turned to ice. rifle barrels, at least 3 of them, pointed down at him from the canyon rim. Apache warriors. Jake's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but he stopped himself. Drawing on 3 rifles was suicide, and besides, if they had wanted him dead, he would be dead already. The fact that they hadn't shot him meant they wanted something else. "Easy, Bell," he murmured to his horse, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. A voice called out from above in Apache, sharp and commanding. Jake didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Stay put. 3 warriors rappelled down the canyon walls with the fluid grace of men born to climb. They were young, probably in their 20s, with the lean, hard look of fighters. Their faces were painted with traditional war designs, and their weapons were well-maintained and deadly. The leader was taller than the others, with broader shoulders and scars on his arms that spoke of many battles. He approached Jake with the confidence of a man who knew he held all the advantages. When he spoke, his English was better than Jake had expected. "You are the white man who helped Ayanna." It wasn't a question. Jake nodded slowly, keeping his hands where they could be seen. I am Takota, her brother. These are Nailnish and Bidzei, my cousins. We have been watching you for 3 days, waiting to see what you would do." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his voice steady. "And what have you decided?" Takota studied him for a long moment. "You have not tried to follow her home. You have not brought other white men to this place. You have not boasted of seeing an Apache woman in a state of undress. These things surprise us. I gave her my word I wouldn't cause her trouble." "Words are easy to speak," Nailnish said, his English heavily accented. "Actions show truth." Jake looked at each of the warriors in turn. "What do you want from me?" "First, we want to know why you keep coming back," Takota said. "This is the 4th time you have ridden near this canyon. The wild horses you claim to seek were seen 50 miles north yesterday. So they had been watching him longer than he thought." Jake felt foolish for believing he had been subtle. Apache scouts could track a shadow across bare rock. "I wanted to make sure she was safe," Jake said honestly. "And I hoped I might see her again." The 3 warriors exchanged glances. Bidzei, who had remained silent, stepped closer. He was the youngest of the 3, with intelligent eyes and a thoughtful manner. "You have feelings for our sister," he said. It wasn't a question either. Jake saw no point in lying. "Yes, I know it's impossible, but yes." Takota's expression darkened. "You are right. It is impossible. White men and Apache women. Such things bring only pain and death. I would never hurt her." "You would not mean to," Takota corrected. "But your people would hurt her for being with you. And my people would kill you both for the shame you would bring." Jake felt the weight of truth in those words. He had known it himself, but hearing it spoken so bluntly made the reality even more crushing. "Then, why haven't you killed me?" Jake asked. "Because Ayanna spoke for you," Bidzei answered. "She said you were honorable. She said you could be trusted. She made us promise to give you a chance to prove yourself." Hope fluttered in Jake's chest like a caged bird. "She spoke for me?" "Do not let it go to your head, white man," Nailnish warned. "She speaks for many people. She has a soft heart, sometimes too soft for her own good. But," Takota said slowly, "she also has good judgment about people. She has never been wrong about a person's character. This is why we have not simply killed you and left your bones for the buzzards." Jake swallowed hard. "What kind of chance are you talking about?" "There are men coming," Takota said, his voice growing serious. "Bad men. They have been asking questions in the settlements about Apache camps. They claim to be looking for stolen cattle, but we know they seek our women and children to sell to the slavers in Mexico." Jake's stomach turned. He had heard rumors of such men, scavengers who preyed on isolated Apache families. "How many?" "7. They are led by a man called Brennan, a killer with yellow hair and dead eyes. They have been seen near Willow Creek, 2 days' ride from here. They moved toward our winter camp." "You want me to warn them?" Jake asked. Bidzei shook his head. "Our people know they come. We want you to help us stop them." Jake stared at the young warrior. "You want me to fight alongside Apache against white men?" "They are not men," Nailnish spat. "They are animals who would steal children from their mother's arms." "This is your chance," Takota said. "Help us protect our people, and perhaps we will believe you are different from other whites. Refuse, and ride away now, and never return to this canyon." Jake didn't hesitate. "What do you need me to do?" The 3 warriors smiled grimly. Takota nodded with approval. "First, we need information. These men will be more willing to talk to a white cowboy than to Apache scouts. Find them, learn their plans, discover how many guns they have, and what route they mean take. And then? Then, we stop them, Bidsy Eye said simply. Whatever it takes. Jake extended his hand to Dakota. After a moment's hesitation, the Apache warrior clasped it. You have my word, I'll help you protect your people. See that you do, Dakota replied. Because if you betray us, or if harm comes to our family because of your actions, I will hunt you across every desert and mountain until I find you. And when I do, you will die very slowly. Jake believed him. Understood. Good. Now, there is someone who wants to see you. Jake's heart leaped. Ayana. She is at the waterfall. We will watch the approaches. You have 1 hour. Jake nearly ran to the hidden alcove behind the waterfall. She was there, sitting on a smooth boulder, wearing a traditional Apache dress of soft doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Her hair was braided with ribbons and small silver ornaments that caught the light. She was beautiful beyond words. Hello, Jake Morrison, she said softly. Hello, Ayana. I look what? Beautiful. You look beautiful. She smiled, and Jake's heart did somersaults in his chest. I wanted to return this to you. She held up his blue shirt, clean and carefully folded. Keep it, Jake said quickly. I mean, if you want to. I have others. I cannot keep gifts from a white man. It would cause talk among my people. Jake took the shirt, their fingers brushing as he did. The contact sent electricity up his arm. Your brothers told me about the men who are coming. I'm going to help stop them. Ayana's eyes widened with concern. It is dangerous. These are not good men. I know, but I can't stand by and let them hurt innocent people. Your people don't deserve to live in fear. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you risk yourself for us? Jake struggled to find the right words. Because it's right. Because you asked your brothers to give me a chance. Because he took a deep breath. Because I care about you. Ayana looked down at her hands. Jake, we cannot. I know, he said quickly. I know it's impossible. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. She looked up at him then, and he saw pain in her dark eyes. Do you think I do not feel the same? Do you think my heart is made of stone? Jake's breath caught in his throat. You feel? I think of you every day. I dream of your kind eyes and gentle voice. When I wear your shirt at night, I pretend you are there to protect me from the darkness. Tears glistened on her cheeks. But we live in different worlds, Jake Morrison. The space between us is filled with blood and hatred and fear. Jake stepped closer, his hands aching to touch her face and wipe away her tears. Maybe things could change. Maybe, she whispered, but not yet. Perhaps not ever. They stood in silence, the weight of impossible love heavy between them. Finally, Jake spoke. After we deal with these slavers, I'll go away. I won't come back to the canyon. I won't make this harder for you than it already is. No, Ayana said firmly. Do not make promises you cannot keep. The heart wants what it wants, no matter how we try to deny it. Then what do? We take each moment as it comes. We help each other when we can. We hope that someday the world will be different. She stood and moved closer to him. And we remember that love is precious, even when it cannot be. She reached up and touched his cheek gently. Jake closed his eyes and leaned into her touch, memorizing the feel of her skin against his. Be careful tomorrow, she whispered. Come back alive, Jake Morrison. The world has too few good men to lose one to evil ones. I'll come back, he promised. I have something to live for now. Ayana smiled through her tears. Yes, you do. The sound of footsteps on stone announced the return of the warriors. Ayana stepped back, and Jake immediately missed her warmth. Time to go, Dakota called. We have much to prepare before dawn. Jake nodded, but his eyes remained on Ayana. Until I see you again. Until then, she agreed. As Jake rode out of the canyon with the 3 Apache warriors, he carried with him the image of Ayana's face and the memory of her touch. Tomorrow would bring danger and possibly death. But tonight, for the first time in his life, Jake Morrison knew what it meant to truly love someone. The stars wheeled overhead as they made their plans, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The desert held its breath, waiting to see what dawn would bring. Dawn broke gray and cold over the Arizona territory as Jake Morrison rode toward Willow Creek. His breath came out in small puffs, and Bell's hooves crunched through frost-covered sagebrush. Somewhere behind him, hidden in the rocks and arroyos, 3 Apache warriors shadowed his path. He couldn't see them, but he knew they were there, and Their presence was both comforting and terrifying. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Jake would approach the slavers as a fellow white man looking for work. He would gather information about their numbers, weapons, and intentions, then signal the warriors when the time was right to strike. If things went wrong, he would likely be the first to die. As he rode, Jake's mind kept drifting back to the previous evening. The memory of Ayana's touch on his cheek sent warmth through his chest despite the morning chill. He had finally found something worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was risking his life to protect the family of the woman he loved, knowing that same family would never accept him. Willow Creek was little more than a wide spot in a dry stream bed, marked by a few scraggly cottonwoods and a stone fire ring left by previous travelers. Jake smelled wood smoke before he saw the camp, and he slowed Bell to a walk as he approached. 7 men sat around a campfire, exactly as Takota had said. Their horses were good stock, well-fed, and well-cared for, which told Jake these weren't desperate drifters. These were professionals with money behind them. Their gear was expensive, and every man wore at least 2 guns. The leader was easy to identify. Brennan sat apart from the others, a tall man with pale yellow hair and eyes the color of winter ice. His face was angular and cruel, with thin lips that looked like they had never smiled at anything pleasant. A long scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, giving him a perpetually sinister expression. "Morning," Jake called out as he approached, keeping his voice friendly and casual. Several of the men reached for their guns, but Brennan held up a hand. "Easy, boys. He's alone." Cold eyes studied Jake from head to toe. "What brings you out here, cowboy?" Jake dismounted and walked closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Looking for work, if you have any. Name's Jake Morrison. I heard in Tucson that you might be hiring." "Who told you that?" one of the other men asked suspiciously. He was heavy-set with a black beard and nervous eyes. "Bartender at the Silver Dollar. Said you were asking about men who could handle themselves in rough country." Brennan's thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. "Depends what kind of work you're looking for. We're not rounding up cattle." "I figured as much," Jake said, sitting down by the fire uninvited. "Man doesn't need 7 guns to move cattle." "Smart man," Brennan said approvingly. "You ever work with Indians before, Morrison?" Jake's gut tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Fought them a few times. Tried to avoid them mostly. They can be unpredictable." "Oh, we're not planning to fight them," Brennan said, his voice taking on an oily quality that made Jake's skin crawl. "We're planning to catch them." "Catch them?" "There's good money south of the border for healthy Apache women and children. The Mexicans like to break them in young, if you catch my meaning." Brennan's eyes glittered with malice. "Of course, the women are worth more if they're pretty. And if they're untouched." Jake fought to keep his expression impassive while rage boiled in his chest. These weren't just thieves or even killers. They were something far worse. "Sounds profitable." "Very. We've got a buyer in Nogales who pays top dollar for quality merchandise. But it takes skilled men to acquire the goods without damaging them too much." Jake nodded as if considering the proposition. "What's your plan?" "There's a winter camp about 30 miles north of here," said the bearded man Jake had mentally dubbed Blackbeard. "Small band, maybe 40 people total. About half are women and children. The men will fight," added another slaver, a wiry man with a nervous tic that made his left eye twitch constantly. Brennan waved dismissively. "We'll hit them at dawn when most of the warriors are out hunting. Quick and quiet. Kill the old ones and anyone who fights too hard. Take the young women and children who'll survive the trip to Mexico." Jake's hands clenched involuntarily, and he had to force himself to relax them. "When do we move?" "Tomorrow morning. We've been watching them for 3 days. They've got their guard down, living off in the middle of nowhere like they're safe." Brennan's laugh was like broken glass. "They're about to learn different. What about weapons? Apache can be tricky fighters. 7 rifles against maybe 6 or 7 warriors," Blackbeard said confidently. "Plus we'll have surprise on our side. Should be easy enough." Jake spent the rest of the morning with the slavers, learning their names and gathering information. Besides Brennan and Blackbeard, whose real name was Cutter, there was Twitchy called Rawls, a young gunman named Spider, an older man called Doc who seemed to be the group's medic, a half-breed Mexican named Vasquez, and a silent giant everyone just called Big Jim. They were all hardened killers, but they had one crucial weakness. They underestimated their quarry. Jake had seen Apache warriors fight, and he knew 7 men wouldn't be nearly enough if the camp was ready for them. As the afternoon wore on, Jake began looking for an opportunity to slip away and signal the waiting warriors. His chance came when Brennan sent him and Spider to scout the area for Apache patrols. "Keep your eyes open," Brennan warned. "These heathens can hide behind a blade of grass." Jake and Spider rode out together, following a rocky canyon that led toward the Apache camp. Spider was young, maybe 22, with quick hands and empty eyes. He talked constantly, bragging about his kills and the women he'd known in various towns. "You ever been to Nogales?" Spider asked as they rode. "Place is full of pretty senoritas who'll do anything for $1. "Can't say I have," Jake replied. "You like it? Brennan always lets us have a little fun after a job. Of course, sometimes we sample the merchandise on the way down, if you know what I mean." Jake's trigger finger itched, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Sounds like a good setup." They reached a high ridge overlooking the surrounding country. In the distance, Jake could see smoke rising from the Apache winter camp. It looked peaceful and vulnerable, exactly the kind of target these animals preferred. "This should be far enough," Jake said, dismounting to supposedly check the area with field glasses. Spider dismounted too, turning his back to Jake as he surveyed the landscape. It was the opening Jake had been waiting for. Moving silent as death, Jake struck Spider behind the ear with the butt of his pistol. The young gunman dropped like a sack of grain, unconscious but alive. Jake quickly tied and gagged him, then hid his body behind some rocks where he wouldn't be found easily. With Spider's horse in tow, Jake rode to the signal point Dakota had designated, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a giant's thumb pointing at the sky. He built a small fire and used a blanket to create smoke signals in the Apache code Bidsey had taught him. 3 puffs, pause, 2 puffs, pause, 3 puffs. The message was simple, ready to attack. Within minutes, he saw an answering signal from a distant ridge. The warriors were in position. Jake rode hard back toward the slaver camp, leading Spider's riderless horse and practicing the story he would tell. He burst into camp looking worried and out of breath. "What happened?" Brennan demanded, seeing the empty saddle. "Apache patrol," Jake gasped, dismounting quickly. 3 warriors, maybe 4. Spider's horse spooked and threw him into a ravine. "I couldn't get him out alone." Brennan's eyes narrowed. "Is he dead?" "Don't know. He wasn't moving when I left him, but I heard voices coming closer. Had to get out of there." "Damn it," Cutter growled. "I told you boys this was getting too risky." "Shut up," Brennan snapped. "Where exactly did this happen?" Jake gave him a location several miles from where Spider actually lay. "We need to move tonight if we're going to hit that camp. If they found Spider, they'll know we're here." Brennan thought for a long moment. "No, we stick to the plan. Dawn attack, just like we discussed. If they found Spider, they'd already be here." Jake's heart sank. He had hoped to convince them to move early, when the Apache would be ready for them. Instead, they would stick to their original plan to attack the camp at dawn. Except now Dakota and his cousins would be waiting. As night fell, Jake volunteered for first watch. He sat by the dying fire, ostensibly keeping an eye on the surrounding darkness while actually planning his next move. When the time came for the attack, he needed to be ready to help the Apache warriors without getting himself killed in the crossfire. The other slavers settled into their bedrolls, confident in their superiority and the surprise they thought they held. Jake listened to their breathing grow deep and regular, punctuated by Cutter's snoring and Doc's occasional cough. Around midnight, Jake heard it, the soft call of a night bird that wasn't quite right for this part of the desert. Nailnish was out there, probably no more than 50 yards away. Another call, slightly different in pitch, came from a different direction. "Bidsey." Then, a third call from behind camp. "Dakota." The Apache warriors had surrounded the slaver camp without making a sound. Jake marveled at their skill, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Soon, very soon, this would all be over. But as dawn approached and the time for action drew near, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. In his experience, plans that seemed too easy usually were. And this plan had been almost too easy from start. As the first gray light began to touch the eastern horizon, Jake heard Brennan stirring in his bedroll. The slaver leader was an early riser, always awake before his men. In a few minutes, he would rouse the others, and they would begin their final approach to the Apache camp. Jake fingered his pistol grip and said a silent prayer. For Ayanna, for her people, and for his own soul. Whatever happened in the next few hours would change everything, and there would be no going back. The desert held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The first shot came from the darkness like thunder, splitting the pre-dawn silence, and sending the slaver camp into chaos. Jake rolled away from the dying campfire as Brennan's yellow hair appeared over his bedroll, the man coming awake with the instant alertness of a predator. Ambush! Cutter roared, grabbing for his rifle. But the Apache warriors had planned this perfectly. They had waited until the slavers were beginning to stir, when men were at their most vulnerable, awake enough to panic but not alert enough to think clearly. The darkness was their ally, and they used it like a weapon. Jake drew his pistol, but held his fire. In the confusion of muzzle flashes and shouting men, he needed to be sure of his targets. The last thing he wanted was to accidentally shoot one of Ayanna's relatives. Big Jim stumbled to his feet, a massive Sharp's rifle in his hands, but a shadow detached itself from the rocks behind him. Nailnish moved like flowing water, his knife finding the giant's back before the man could turn around. Big Jim dropped his rifle and fell forward with a gurgling cry. They're all around us. Vasquez screamed in Spanish, firing wildly into the darkness. Brennan had found cover behind a boulder and was shouting orders. Form up, back to back. Don't let them get between us. But it was too late for military tactics. The Apache had struck like lightning, and the slavers were scattered across the camp like leaves in a windstorm. Doc tried to run for the horses, but stumbled into Bidsy Eye, who materialized from nowhere with a war club that caved in the older man's skull with a wet crack. Jake spotted movement near the camp's edge and recognized Spider crawling away from where Jake had left him tied up. The young gunman must have worked his way free and made it back to camp just in time for the attack. Spider had a pistol in his hand and was taking aim at Takota, who was engaged with Cutter near the fire. Jake didn't hesitate. His Colt bucked in his hand, and Spider pitched forward with a bullet in his back. The young killer would never hurt another innocent person. You bastard, Brennan snarled, realizing that Jake had turned on them. The slaver leader's rifle swung toward Jake, but Rawls chose that moment to panic completely. I'm getting out of here, Twitchy screamed, running straight toward Brennan's position. The collision sent both men sprawling, and Brennan's shot went wide. Jake used the distraction to dive for better cover behind a fallen log. The battle was turning into a massacre, exactly as it should be. These men had planned to attack a peaceful village and steal women and children. They deserved no mercy, and the Apache warriors were giving them none. Cutter managed to wound Bidsy Eye with a rifle shot to the shoulder, but Takota's tomahawk found the bearded man's chest before he could fire again. Cutter dropped his rifle and looked down at the weapon buried in his sternum with surprise, as if he couldn't believe what had happened to him. Vasquez and Rawls had taken cover together behind some rocks and were firing blindly into the darkness. Their panic made them dangerous. Not to the Apache warriors who could avoid their wild shots, but to Jake, who was caught in the open ground between them and their enemies. A bullet spanged off the rock near Jake's head, sending stone chips into his cheek. He wiped away the blood and tried to spot the shooter. It was Vasquez, and the half-breed was taking more careful aim now that his initial panic had subsided. Jake rolled to his left, just as Vasquez's rifle cracked again. The bullet tore through the space where Jake's head had been a split second earlier. But Jake's movement had exposed him to Rawls, who snapped off a quick shot with his pistol. The bullet took Jake in the left shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a cluster of rocks. Pain exploded through his arm and chest, and he felt warm blood soaking his shirt. His left arm went numb from fingertips to shoulder. Fighting through the haze of pain and shock, Jake forced himself to stay conscious. He could hear Brennan shouting commands, trying to rally his surviving men. There couldn't be many left. Jake counted 2 rifles still firing, maybe 3. A shadow passed over him, and Jake looked up to see Takota crouched beside his position. The Apache warrior's face was streaked with war paint and enemy blood, and his dark eyes burned with controlled fury. How bad? Takota asked, glancing at Jake's wounded shoulder. I'll live, Jake gasped. How many left? 3. Brennan, the Mexican, and the nervous one. They have found good cover. Jake struggled to sit up, using his good arm to brace himself against the rocks. Can you get to them? Not without losing men. They're scared now, but they're also desperate. Desperate men fight hard. A new voice cut through the gunfire, Brennan shouting from his rocky fortress. I know you can hear me, you red devils. I've got something you want. The shooting stopped as everyone strained to hear what the slaver leader was saying. In the sudden silence, Jake could hear his own heart beating and the whisper of wind through the rocks. That's right, Brennan continued. I've got one of your women. Pretty little thing with long black hair. Found her wandering around yesterday evening. Jake's blood turned to ice. Ayanna. Somehow, Brennan had captured Ayanna. She's tied up real nice and tight, Brennan went on, his voice carrying clearly in the dawn air. And she'll stay healthy as long as you back off and let us ride out of here. Takota's face had gone rigid with fury and fear. My sister, he whispered. How is that possible? Jake demanded. She was supposed to be safe at your camp. She must have followed us. She has done such things before when she thought family was in danger. Takota's knuckles were white where he gripped his rifle. She cannot help herself when people she cares about are at risk. Jake felt sick. Ayanna had put herself in danger because she was worried about him. Now she was in the hands of a monster who would use her as a human shield. What do you want? Takota called back. Safe passage out of here. We take the girl with us until we're clear of your territory. Then we let her go. Jake knew it was a lie. Men like Brennan didn't release hostages. If they let the slavers leave with Ayanna, she would end up in Mexico, sold to the highest bidder. The thought made him physically ill. We need a plan, Jake said, struggling to his feet despite the pain in his shoulder. There is no plan, Takota replied grimly. If we attack, they will kill her. If we let them go, they will kill her anyway, after they have used her. There has to be something. Takota studied Jake's face for a long moment. Perhaps there is, but it would require great courage, and you are already wounded. Tell me. You can approach them. Tell them you are only pretending to help us, that you want to rejoin them. Get close enough to kill Brennan, Jake finished. It could work. It would be very dangerous. They may not believe you, and even if they do, you would have to get close to 3 armed men with only 1 good arm. Jake checked his pistol. He had 3 bullets left, and his rifle was somewhere back in the rocks where he had dropped it. Not good odds, but maybe good enough. Cover me, Jake said. When you hear my shot, come running. Takota clasped Jake's good shoulder. If you die doing this, I will tell my sister that you died with honor. If I die doing this, make sure Brennan dies with me. Jake holstered his pistol and stepped out from behind the rocks, his hands visible and empty. Brennan, it's Morrison. Don't shoot. Well, came the slaver's voice. The turncoat wants to come home. I never turned on you, Jake called back, walking slowly toward the sound of Brennan's voice. I was trying to get back to warn you when those devils jumped me. That's so? Then, why were you shooting at us? I was shooting at them. In the dark. How could you tell who I was aiming at? Jake could see them now, holed up in a natural fortress of boulders. Brennan stood behind the largest rock with a rifle in his hands. Vasquez and Rawls flanked him, their weapons trained on the approaches. And there, tied to a scraggly pine tree, was Ayanna. She was alive and appeared unharmed, though her traditional dress was torn and dirty. Her hands were bound behind her back, and a gag covered her mouth. When she saw Jake approaching, her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and terror. Prove you're still with us, Brennan demanded. Kill one of those Apache for me. They're all dead or hiding, Jake lied. Besides, I'm wounded. Can barely hold a gun. Jake was now within 20 feet of their position. Close enough to see the cruel smile on Brennan's scarred face. Close enough to smell the fierce sweat on Vasquez and Rawls. Maybe you're telling the truth, Brennan said. Or maybe you're trying to get close enough to be a hero. Either way, you can prove yourself by putting a bullet in the girl's head. Jake's heart stopped. What? You heard me. She's Apache, trash anyway. Kill her, and I'll know you're still one of us. Jake looked at Ayanna, saw the trust in her dark eyes. She believed in him completely, even now. She knew he would never hurt her, no matter what it cost him. I can't do that, Brennan. The slaver leader's smile widened. I thought not. You're in love with this red-skinned bitch, aren't you? Jake didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Well, ain't that touching, Brennan sneered. A white man throwing his life away for some savage squaw. She's worth 10 of you, Jake said quietly. Maybe so, but I'm the one with the gun pointed at her pretty little head. Brennan raised his rifle, and Jake knew he was out of time. In one fluid motion, he drew his pistol and fired. The bullet took Brennan's center mass, punching through his chest and dropping him like a stone. But Vasquez and Rawls were already moving. Vasquez's rifle barked, and Jake felt the bullet tear through his already wounded shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. Rawls fired at the same instant, his shot going wide, but close enough that Jake felt the wind of its passage. Jake forced himself to stay upright, raised his pistol with his one good arm, and put his second bullet between Vasquez's eyes. The half-breed toppled backward over the rocks. Rawls panicked, dropping his rifle and clawing for his sidearm. But before he could draw, Takota appeared like an avenging spirit, his tomahawk finding the nervous man's skull with a sound like breaking wood. Jake collapsed, his strength finally giving out. Blood soaked his shirt, and the world swam in and out of focus. But they had won. Ayanna was safe. Strong hands lifted him, and Jake found himself looking into Ayanna's worried face. She had freed herself somehow and was now cradling his head in her lap. "You came for me," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Always," Jake managed to say. "I'll always come for you." "Rest now," she said softly. "You are safe. You are with family." As consciousness faded, Jake heard Takota speaking to his cousins in Apache. Then the warrior's voice switched to English, and Jake knew the words were meant for him. "You have proven yourself, Jake Morrison. You have spilled your blood for our people. You have earned the right to walk among us with honor." Jake smiled and let the darkness take him. He had found his place at last. Jake Morrison woke to the sound of singing and the scent of sage smoke. His shoulder ached with a deep, throbbing pain, but it was a clean pain, the kind that came from healing rather than dying. He tried to sit up and immediately felt gentle hands pressing him back down. "Be still," Ayanna's voice whispered beside him. "You have lost much blood." Jake opened his eyes and found himself in what appeared to be a traditional Apache wickiup, a dome-shaped dwelling made of wooden poles and covered with animal hides. Soft furs served as his bed, and a small fire crackled in a central pit. The interior was warm and comfortable, decorated with beautiful woven baskets and painted hides. "How long have I been unconscious?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse and dry. 3 days, Ayanna replied, lifting a gourd bowl to his lips. "Drink this. It will help with the pain and weakness." The liquid was bitter, but warming, with an herbal taste Jake didn't recognize. Almost immediately, he felt strength beginning to flow back into his limbs. The others? Takota and his cousins? They are well. Bidziai's shoulder wound was not serious. "You're the only one who was badly hurt." Jake looked around the dwelling more carefully. "Where are we?" "The winter camp of our people. Takota and the others brought you here after the battle. Our medicine woman, my grandmother, has been caring for your wounds." As if summoned by the mention of her name, an elderly Apache woman entered the wickiup. She was small and weathered, with silver hair braided with colorful beads and eyes that seemed to see everything. She spoke to Ayanna in rapid Apache, examining Jake with the professional interest of a healer. "What is she saying?" Jake asked. "She says you will live, but you must rest for several more days." "She also says..." Ayanna paused, a flush coloring her cheeks. "What?" "She says the spirits have marked you, that your aura has changed since you came among us. She believes you have been chosen for something important." Jake didn't know what to make of that. He had never been a particularly spiritual man, but his time in the desert had taught him that there were forces in the world beyond his understanding. The old woman spoke again, this time directing her words toward Jake. Though he couldn't understand her language, there was something in her tone that sounded almost like approval. "She wants to know if you are ready to hear the truth about your situation," Ayanna translated. "What truth?" Ayanna's expression grew serious. "You cannot return to your old life, Jake Morrison. By helping us against the slavers, you have declared yourself an enemy of your own people. If the army or the territorial government learns what you did, they will hang you as a traitor." Jake had known this was a possibility, but hearing it stated so bluntly was still a shock. "And if I stay here, that depends on the Council of Elders. They are meeting now to decide your fate." Before Jake could respond, the flap covering the entrance opened and Takota ducked inside. The warrior looked tired but satisfied, like a man who had completed an important task. "The council has reached a decision," he announced in English. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on the next few words. You are welcome to stay among us, if you choose, Dakota continued. You have proven your honor and your loyalty. You have spilled your blood for our people and asked for nothing in return. You are no longer white or Apache. You are simply a good man, and good men are always welcome in our lodges. Relief flooded through Jake like cool water. And if I choose to leave, then you leave with our gratitude and our protection. We will guide you to the Mexican border if you wish, or to California. You will never have to face the consequences of your actions alone. Jake looked at Ayanna, searching her face for some sign of what she wanted him to do. But her expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. I need to think about this, Jake said finally. Dakota nodded. Of course. It is a decision that will shape the rest of your life. Take all the time you need. The warrior left, and Jake found himself alone with Ayanna once more. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings and impossible choices. What do you want me to do? Jake asked quietly. I want you to do what is best for you, Ayanna replied. I want you to be happy. That's not an answer. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are safe and near. I want to share my life with you, to learn your stories and teach you mine. I want to grow old beside you and face whatever the future brings together. Jake's heart soared, but he forced himself to consider the reality of the situation. And what kind of life would that be? I would be an outcast from my own people, living as a permanent guest among yours. What kind of future could we have? I do not know, Ayanna admitted. No white man has ever joined our band permanently. There would be challenges, difficulties we cannot foresee. Some of our people would never fully accept you, just as some of your people would never accept me. Then, maybe we should both leave, head to California or Oregon, somewhere we could start fresh. Ayanna shook her head. I cannot abandon my people. They are my blood, my heart. Asking me to leave them would be like asking me to stop breathing. Jake understood. He had seen the bonds that held Apache families together, bonds stronger than steel cables. Ayanna would wither away if separated from her tribe, like a flower transplanted to foreign soil. Then, I guess I have my answer, Jake said. Tears welled in Ayanna's eyes. You will go. No, Jake said firmly. I'll stay, if you'll have me. The transformation in Ayanna's face was like watching the sun rise. Her tears turned from sorrow to joy, and she threw her arms around his neck, careful not to jar his injured shoulder. Are you certain? She asked against his ear. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, Jake replied, holding her close with his good arm. Besides, I've been thinking about what your grandmother said. Maybe the spirits did bring us together for a reason. What reason? Maybe to show that people from different worlds can find common ground. Maybe to prove that love is stronger than hate. Jake pulled back to look into her eyes. Or maybe just because we needed each other. Ayanna smiled through her tears. I like that reason best. They were interrupted by the sound of voices outside the wickiup. Dakota called for permission to enter, and soon the shelter was filled with Apache warriors and elders. Jake recognized Bidzai and Nailnish, their faces painted with ceremonial designs. Several older men he didn't know stood behind them, their expressions grave, but not unfriendly. The eldest of the group, a man with white hair and deep-set eyes, stepped forward and began to speak in Apache. His voice was formal and ritualistic like a judge pronouncing sentence. What is he saying? Jake asked Ayanna quietly. He is performing the adoption ceremony, she whispered back, her voice filled with wonder. He is making you officially one of our people. The ceremony was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The elder placed his hands on Jake's head and spoke words in a language that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. Other voices joined in, creating a chorus that seemed to resonate in Jake's bones. When it was finished, Dakota smiled and clasped Jake's good shoulder. Welcome, brother. You are now Nate, which means mischief maker in our language. We thought it was appropriate for a man who pretended to be a slaver in order to destroy slavers. Jake laughed to spite himself. Nate, I like it. The gathered warriors and elders filed out, leaving Jake and Ayanna alone once more. But now everything was different. Now they had a future together, however uncertain it might be. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now you learn to be Apache, Ayanna replied with a mischievous smile. You must learn our language, our customs, our ways of hunting and fighting. It will take years. Years. Are you in a hurry to be somewhere else, Nate? Jay considered this. A month ago, he had been a drifting cowboy with no ties and no purpose beyond his next meal and his next horse. Now he had a home, a family, and a woman who loved him. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was the life he wanted. No hurry at all, he said, pulling Iona close. I've got all the time in the world. Outside the wiki-up, the desert wind carried the sound of children playing and women singing as they worked. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon, and the eternal song of the hidden waterfall echoed through the canyons. Jake Morrison, now Nate, had found his place at last. It wasn't the place he had expected, but it was the place he belonged. And as he held the woman he loved in his arms, he knew that some journeys were worth every step, no matter how far they led from the familiar path. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were those on both sides who never fully accepted the unusual union, and the changing times brought new conflicts and difficulties. The Apache way of life was under increasing pressure from the expanding American frontier, and there were dark days when it seemed the old ways might disappear entirely. But Jake and Iona faced each challenge together, drawing strength from their love and from the family that had embraced them both. They raised children who were proud of both their heritages, teaching them to walk in two worlds with honor and courage. Jake never regretted his choice. Sometimes, when he sat by the hidden waterfall where their love had begun, he would remember the lonely cowboy he had once been and marvel at the journey that had brought him home. Love had indeed proven stronger than hate, and two people from different worlds had found a way to build a bridge across the divide. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest truth of all, that love, real love, recognizes no boundaries. It flows like water, finding its way through the hardest stone, carving new channels, and creating new possibilities where none had existed before. And in the hidden canyons of Arizona, where the waterfall sang its eternal song, their love story became legend, a tale told around campfires for generations, a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely paths lead to the most extraordinary destinations.